All right, welcome. Everyone, people joining from DC, Philadelphia, Atlanta, thank you for joining us. My name is Addison Tobias, and I'm the Programs Manager at Museum Hugh. I'm so excited to have our amazing speakers here today for the kickoff session of the Career Jumpstart series. For those of you who are not members, Museum Hugh is a member-driven organization based in New York City. We are dedicated to uplifting the voices of people of color in the arts and culture field by offering different resources and tools in a supportive environment. So we're so glad to have you all here. And if you're a member, welcome back. Thank you for joining. For today's session, it's the first of 4 virtual sessions of workshops that consist of conversations and presentations led by art experts in the field who are going to provide insight today on their career pathways. We're having a few more dedicated to internship preparation, cover letter and resume building, and how to network. So we'll keep you posted after this program and send you the links. But now briefly, I just want to pass it over to my colleague, Amanda Thomas, who is a Museum Hugh's Communication and Membership Manager. And she's just going to highlight some of our membership offerings and our updated membership platform.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all and that you're here. As Addison said, I'm the Membership and Communications Manager here at Museum Hugh, and just wanted to remind all of our members that they should sign into our new platform and get acquainted with it. It's a lot more intuitive. There's forums where you can chat with one another, and also we have a calendar of all of our upcoming programs, as well as programs from friend and family institutions. You'll also find a new and improved job board on there. So if you're not a member, I encourage you to check us out. You receive free admission into lots of programs like this and tours. And we're always looking to expand our audiences and have a great diverse group of people. And again, members, please make sure to sign into the new membership platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing. So I'll just give a brief overview of today's session. I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists today, and then we will have a little question and discussion all together. And then following that, we will have a Q&A portion. So if you have any questions, feel free to activate the chat, and we'll keep track of that, and we can answer those at the end. And as well as feel free to unmute and have your camera on and such. But now I'll introduce our amazing panelists today. So I will start off with Jayde Barton. Jayde, if you want to give a little wave, but Jayde is an African-American educator, mental health advocate, and curator from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Jayde received her Master of Arts in Teaching from Relay Graduate School of Education in 2020, which she completed during her times as corps member with Teach for America, Greater Chicago Northwest, Indiana. In May of 2023, Jayde made her curatorial debut with her group arts exhibition, Let Black Folks Feel, which centered Black mental health and destigmatizing of Black emotional vulnerability, housed at Harlem's Heath Gallery. Currently, Jayde is developing a youth artist residency for Black high school students in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, that will launch in summer of 2024. I can't wait to hear more about that. And Jayde is the founder of Let Black Kids Feel, LLC, a business dedicated to culturally responsive social emotional learning products and professional development. So I'm so excited to have you here with us, Jayde. And our next panelist is Es-pranza Humphrey. Thanks for the wave. Es-pranza is a historian of Black studies and museum educator based out of New York. She received her BA in history from the University of New Haven and her MA in American Studies from Columbia University. Her research has incorporated interdisciplinary approaches to spotlight the Black feminine identity expressed through various forms of performance art. Her latest research endeavors focus on the history of fashion and activism for Black women in the 20th century. She is currently the education programs coordinator at Poster House, where she curated the exhibition Black Power to Black People, branding the Black Panther Party. So thank you for joining us today, Es-pranza. And our third speaker of the panel today is Rachel Maria Stuart. Hi, Rachel. Rachel is an arts and culture development professional with East Coast roots and is based in New York City. Rachel currently works at the Metropolitan Museum of Art as Assistant Development Officer of Leadership Gifts, and particularly supports the fundraising efforts for various areas within the museum, such as general operating support, special non-capital campaigns, trustee giving, and endowments for department positions. Rachel earned her BA in Arts and Entertainment Management with a concentration in business from Dean College in Franklin, Massachusetts. So it is clear we have an amazing panel today, and we will get to hear from each of these amazing speakers about how they have curated their current career pathways in the arts. So I would love to start off this discussion by fielding the question for each of our speakers. How did you each begin building your career in the arts, and what was your pathway like? If you could talk us through that briefly. And I will choose Es-pranza to kick this off.
Thank you all for having me. And I see a lot of places being shouted out in the chat, but for some reason, every time I'm in a panel, somebody from New Haven is in the chat. So if you are from New Haven, can you drop that? It's just because I went to school there that I always see somebody from New Haven. But anyway, how did I get into the arts? I had I always loved history. I always loved the teaching field when it came to history. I had an amazing history teacher. I'll elaborate more on that later. But I was sitting down with my mom one day and I was like, I think I really want to be like, I want to work at a museum. And she remembered this when I was in high school. And so, I love my mother so much, but she does this all the time. She will take it upon herself to look things up for me to do, like go to summer camp for 2.5 weeks. And then I just get sent there. So she decided she's going to look up any internship in the city for me to apply to. And it just so happens that the New York Historical Society had a teen internship program. So she came home one day and she was like, you're going to do this application and I'm going to sit down with you and we're going to do it together and we're going to send it off together and you're going to get called in for an interview. And that's what ended up happening. I sat down with my mother and I filled out this internship application. And after, I think, a round or two of interviews, I had my first internship at a museum. And prior to that moment, I only really thought of two directions you could go with history. It was either you're going to be a history teacher or you're going to be a museum curator. There's nothing in between that. But museums need so many other people to function, which I eventually found out. And so I just kind of had this love for museums from the moment I did that internship. And I ended up applying to a college internship at the same place. And I was able to work really closely with the education staff. So I have my mother to thank for urging me to start a career in museums.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that personal story. And your mom sounds amazing. I know members of Museum View, we got to meet your mom supporting you when we visited the Black Panther exhibition, which was incredible. So thank you for sharing that. Jayde, can you please share how you kind of got your career started in the arts?
Sure. It's even crazy, I think, to say that I have a career, considering that it's just beginning. So in my day-to-day job, I'm an assistant principal. So my 9 to 5, what pays the bills, is in education. But I've always been very creative. As a young child, I did drama and theater. I wrote, I did photography, was just always involved in all the things, and actually almost went to art school, Sarah Lawrence, actually here in New York. But I was a very like, want to be a responsible kid. So I ended up going to college in my state because it was just way more affordable. So I never really lost loving creativity and being immersed in the arts. It just kind of got taken away from me because once I made the choice to not go to an art school, I really just focused on education and policy and working in that realm. But when I moved to New York in 2020, I came to the city, ended up connecting with a lot of people who were creatives, artists, painters, photographers, filmmakers, which just naturally is always something that's happened. Again, being someone who does love the arts. And so being so inspired by the people around me, I decided that I really wanted to tap back into, I guess, my inner child and really get back into my creativity. And New York is such an inspirational place to be able to do that. So connected with people that I knew and started this vision of wanting to curate this group art show. So I was very fortunate to have some of my friends who are painters be a part of the show, also just other people who my friend knew that helped me create this whole vision for Let Black Folks Feel, brought into the space. And so from there, I was able to build more connections and really dive into now building this art career.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And the exhibition at Heath Gallery was incredible. It was so inspirational to see. So thank you for sharing your work. And I'll pass it over to Rachel.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I kind of had a similar past as my fellow panelists. I was involved with the arts at a very young age. I also credit my mom for giving me that exposure. I think that is so important for parents to really, especially if, themselves are passionate about the arts. And I was lucky that my mom was. So she would take me to shows, theater, dance. So I just always loved the creative field. And I also did theater. And at a very young age, I realized that I did not like being on stage. I wasn't a performer. I enjoyed drawing and painting, but I didn't necessarily consider myself an artist. And back then I really didn't know that there were other art jobs. I really thought you either had to be like a performer or an artist. And it actually wasn't until like high school when I started applying to colleges that I realized that there's a whole industry within the arts. There's obviously what's on stage or what's hanging on a wall in a museum or gallery. But there's this whole other behind the scenes component, both, with tech, with installation, but also management. So that's something that, and I think have a very business-like mind. So the fact that there was a business within the arts was just like the perfect bingo for me. So I actually got my degree in arts and entertainment management, which I feel very lucky to have found, because especially when I was first looking for colleges, I wasn't necessarily finding a lot of colleges that offered that program. And I was really fortunate. I think I see more now coming up that a lot of colleges are now offering that type of program. So I did mine, and I tried a bunch of different things. I took like a costume class. I took museum management. I did tech production. I really dipped my toes to really build up my experience, no matter what it was, even if I necessarily didn't think that I was going to do what exactly that class was about. I always wanted to dip my toes just to, see for myself. So after college, I felt like I was still itching to learn more, not necessarily in a school setting, but maybe in an internship and fellowship. So I did a fellowship at the American Conservatory Theater in development. It was I took one nonprofit fundraising class and I enjoyed it. So I thought, I might like development. And that's really where I found my passion for funding for the arts. That's essentially what it is. You are fundraising all these different capacities for either the organization or if it's an independent show. Obviously the art, you need money to do it. So I really found that passion, and I really ran with it. So after my fellowship, I ended up here in Manhattan at an off-Broadway theater, Signature Theater. And again, that kind of reiterated how much I loved working in this field. And I wanted to that's when I knew that I really wanted to expand my career and really shoot high and potentially join an organization that, was much larger. And I was always interested in the visual arts, but my background and experience was more in theater, and I really knew nothing about museum management except for that one class I did. But I had the experience, I had the passion, so I thought, why not give it a try? So I ended up at the Guggenheim, which is where I met Addison, and I loved that field. I loved the arts world in New York, across the states, across the country. It's so big. I learned so much. And from the Guggenheim is how I ended up at the Met. So it's just a matter of, dipping your toes, seeing what you really connect to, and, going for those opportunities.
Thank you all for sharing. Yes, shout out to our time at the Guggenheim when we worked there. But I hear a similar through line from each of you, even though all your paths are not exactly the same, you all have an affinity and appreciation for the arts. But all your pathways and your current roles are also different, even though it's all in the art field. I'm curious to know, when did you realize your why? Like, it sounds like it started from childhood for a lot of our speakers here, but when did you realize your why, or are you still in the process of finding your why? And has it changed throughout your career pathway from when you were younger, when you first started, to where you currently are at today in your role? And I don't know if we want to go bounce around, popcorn around, or if someone wants to answer first. I see Es-pranza unmuted.
Should we do it? Should we do the same thing and then bounce around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
I would say that I remember in 9th grade, I had this amazing history teacher, Miss Lennon. I'll never forget her name. I was always really good at history. Like, I think I excelled the most in social studies or history class, no matter what grade I was in. But there was like this day where we were in the ancient Greek or ancient Roman unit. It would have been ancient Roman unit, and we were talking about like Julius Caesar, and she just like stopped everything we were doing, and she had us reenact the murder scene with Brutus and all of that. And she didn't stop there. Like, the next unit, she would select people. Sorry, in New York, sirens. She didn't stop there. The next unit, she had us do another reenactment of something. And I remember thinking, oh, this makes the storytelling of history so interesting when you're able to do that type of stuff. And I didn't realize it until recently that I was really drawn to the storytelling of history. I just didn't know that yet. So when I finally decided, okay, I think I want to be a history teacher, this was after my internship and everything. I was like, the history teacher seems like the best path. Right as I'm in college doing a 4+1 program, which I'm sure a lot of you had or have in your colleges, like that you do 4 years of one thing, and then that 1 year you do a teaching fellowship. Right when I was about to do that, they got rid of it at my college. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this history degree now? Like, I still have 2 more years left at this place. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But they still let me do 2 teaching shadowing things. And while I was doing that, I was like, they made me shadow at an all-boys school. I was like, I'm not going to be doing this. I know it. So I thought about it, and I was like, okay, well, what do I actually like about this stuff? I like the storytelling of history. And so when I got that internship again in college, I started to understand, okay, as an educator in a museum, I can tell these stories, and I can do this with any grade. And I don't have to see these kids from 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to 5. I get to see different kids every hour. And I just started growing that love of storytelling more than I think I was growing a love of like physically sitting in a classroom, doing a thing from a textbook, and then moving on to the next thing. I really appreciated the storytelling, and that trickled into like curatorial stuff. I think as a curator, my main goal is, how do I tell the story of this thing? How do I tell the story of Black women in the 1920s, showing I do chorus girls. Like, how did chorus girls tell the story of Black feminine radicalism during a time when Black women were seen as promiscuous if they were even on a stage? So I like the storytelling. And so I think that is how I found my why. I had to really think, like, I know I like this thing, but why do I like this thing? It's because I like to tell a story through history.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so interesting that you were able to kind of piece that together. Like, you knew what you liked, and then you were able to find out what you didn't like through trying some different avenues. And I think that's something that's so important when you are trying to like figure out, what am I really passionate about and really, really good at? But still you were able to like intersect that with the arts. So thank you for sharing. I will pass it over to Jayde.
Yes, I also would like to start. I have a very needy dog who decided that she wants to be in my face right now. So if she jumps up, I'm so sorry. But in kind of discussing my why, transparently, I feel like I am still in a sense, I'm getting closer to understanding my why. So I think it's really funny to hear Es-pranza kind of talk about this idea of like not wanting to be in the classroom and being with children, as I feel like actually being with children is what helped lead me to my why and even beginning this artistic sort of journey. And a large part of that, if we're thinking about these shared narratives, and I would say I share this narrative too of having parents who both were very creative people, but being Black people in the 70s in South Carolina, that's not something that's always realized, but always appreciated the fact that whatever writing class, drama camp, whatever I wanted to do, my parents were always huge supporters of that. But in teaching, and especially my teaching career started in Chicago, there were not real art programs there, but I had a lot of really talented children who loved to draw. And it was really exciting to be able to try to create a space in my classroom to really be able to cultivate that for them. But in seeing that they didn't have those opportunities, it made me one realize that I was very fortunate to be able to grow up to have that access and to have that privilege because so many children growing up don't, and especially so many children that look like me. And then additionally, something that was really, I think it really pulled out for me is that I can also build that for myself. Oftentimes I think as a teacher, you're very self-sacrificing and that you're always kind of thinking about the needs of your students or the needs of your school, but you're never really building that space to really create a life for yourself outside of being in a school. And we could even put that in other contexts, other careers as well, but I'll speak to a school because that's all I know. And so I think coming to New York, and like I said, meeting people who really were deep in these art fields, who were curators, who are doing shows, who are filmmakers, it really led me to say, hey, I don't want my sole identity to just be teacher or my sole identity to now, I guess, just be like assistant principal. I want to be multifaceted. I want to explore all the things that make me happy. And one thing that was really missing was that artistic identity and really leaning into being a creative person and leaning into wanting to build a career in the arts. And so when I think about my why, and I would say maybe for everybody, I think that the beauty of that is that like our whys can change, but also our whys can be varied. You know, we don't ever have to be defined by one thing. And so it's really exciting to be able to really step into that and step into this idea of being a multifaceted person who maybe in one lens or one respect, you see me in this regard, but in another space, you get to see me in this other regard, and that my life gets to just have the color of 9 to 5, or I guess my hours are 7:20 to 4:20. I'm with children and I'm getting to be in that space and getting to be like teacher Jade. And then after hours, I get to do exciting opportunities like this and get to talk about my love for creativity. So long story short, my why is varied, it's still evolving, and I'm really excited to see as I continue to grow, as I continue to meet more people and have more experiences, how does my why actually still continue to shift?
Thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing and transparency about your whys can change. And I think it's so important when we think about like a career path. A lot of our identities, like you said, can be tied to one thing, but they don't have to. And I don't think that's something that people talk about enough. Like you don't have to just identify like with one career or your career at all. You can have your career and have all these other outside amazing things too. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jade. And I'll pass it over to Rachel.
Yeah, when I think about my why, I mean, I again think back to when I was first exposed to the arts, and it really left an impact on me, an impact that's lasted 28 years essentially. So I knew that in some sense I wanted my career to also be impactful. And although, you know, I'm in an office 9 to 5, and there are stresses that go along with work, but at the end of the day, when I come home and I think about the work that I've done, I feel very fulfilled. I on the development side, you talk to a lot of different people. Particularly, I work with individuals who give money to the museum, and I hear a bunch of different stories. I hear a bunch of different reasons why the art impacted them, how it's impacted them, how it's changed their life. And, you know, I could really relate to that. And also, when you're in this field in development, you are essentially supporting an artist's work. You're supporting an organization that's able to present this work. You're really giving that fuel that allows an artist, allows an art institution to do the best work that they can, to provide offerings that are more accessible, and to really make an impact in the community that they're in. And I wanted to be a part of that, and that really just, as I mentioned, just kind of like fulfills me. But also I realized, as a woman of color in this field, when I worked in theater, and even at the Guggenheim and the Met, it's largely white dominated. And when I was first starting out, especially as a fellow, I would be in a room with my team, or multiple teams, and I was the only woman of color. And I noticed that there was a lack of people of color, women in generally, that in leadership positions. And I definitely have the tenacity, the experience to one day be a leader. And I really wanted to forge that path for myself, for anyone who comes after, someone who comes before. I really wanted to make my own print on the art, in the arts, and that really drives me. So I would say my why is the impact that I feel with my work, but also the vision I see for the arts in general down the line, and how we could change the face of leadership within the arts as a whole.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rachel. Yes, I think that's something that resonates with a lot of arts workers for sure. And I feel like we're all really glad to have you and the position, and you have that tenacity. You are a leader. So thank you for doing the work that you do. And thank you all for sharing on that question. So my next question, I'm wondering, how do you all balance your work, your 9 to 5, your life, and your outside passions? I know that, like, Jayde, you were mentioning, like, your daytime job is assistant principal, and you're working with students, but then you have all of these outside, you have your Black Kids Field that you're starting, you have your curate, your conceptual work that you're working on and such. And so I didn't know if you could talk a bit about that, and then we could kind of popcorn around.
Yeah, of course. I'll be so transparent. It's not easy. It's really, really difficult. Because, you know, again, we can get very caught up like in our jobs, and then it is very easy that once you come home from your job, you don't want to think literally about anything. You just want to decompress and just like relax. But I think one thing that I've done that really helps me create that balance is really just sort of like determining like what are the days that are just my days, what are the days that I'm going to like work on the things that are my passions, and then also just reminding myself that I'm never going to really be able to make a lot of the passions and things that I'm also interested in outside of my job happen if I don't take that time to invest in myself. And I think that making the exhibition happen, even though it was a lot of work kind of navigating all of the planning behind it, going back and forth to the gallery, but still having like the expectations of my job, the feeling of having accomplished that and really seeing the outcome, and even just like the aftermath of it all, has really been such a motivating feeling. And I think it really is just like kind of forcing yourself to get started, because like with anything, once you get started, once you see that progress, once you see what you've accomplished, that's really what keeps you motivated. That's what makes you want to create the plan. That's what makes you want to open up the laptop or go to the art show or connect with this person even when you don't feel like it, because you've seen that result. And I think, again, it's really cheesy because I do relate everything a lot of the times back to like teaching and whatnot. But, I think I also had to take a lot of my mindset, like as a teacher, and thinking about telling my kids things like you have to, you know, you have to put in the work, or you have to really like prioritize what your goals are and think about the bigger picture when approaching something. And I think thinking about the end, thinking about the bigger picture is what helps that balance take place.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Absolutely. I think it sounds like you have a lot of varying priorities, but and that you're balancing it all at one time. So thank you for sharing that and being transparent that it can be difficult and such, but that your progress is what motivates you. I'm going to pop it over to Es-pranza next to kind of answer, how do you balance all of your day-to-day work, your outside passions, or do they coexist as one as well?
I think that I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, to be honest. I always thought that I was a very I always thought I was a very organized person. And then I started going to therapy and I realized a lot of the anxieties I had were because I wasn't as organized as I thought I was. And so I think what has helped, one is therapy, and two has been like, what are these moments, these glimmers in my life that inspire me or make me happy? And in what ways do those inspire like my work, my passion, my life? So nature has always been the source of like my glimmers. So if I'm going for a walk, I'll pop in a podcast and there is my like usually a history podcast, let's be honest. I'm a history nerd. So I'll do something like that and that'll inspire me to maybe write something or write a piece that I really wasn't inspired to write maybe a week before, a couple days before, a couple hours before. But I also think that keeping a group of people around me who are very passionate about art, I think that has helped me recently the most, because when an opportunity comes up, I think that they're excited for me to do that opportunity, way more excited than probably I would be for myself, because I can get into my own head and say like, oh, maybe I'm not the most like equipped to do this thing. But if I tell other people that this is an opportunity, my mom has been really good at this too, but just telling her the opportunity, they will excite me for that opportunity. So I would say that I don't think I've perfected the formula yet, but I think that as long as I focus on those moments, those places that inspire me, like nature, or speak to those people that I look up to or that inspire me, I think that has been what helps me kind of keep those separate parts of my life. Well, they're not always separate, but those are separate parts of my life that I'm able to like sustain.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like you are really focused on finding things that help ground you. And I think that's really important, especially when day-to-day jobs are, even if we're super passionate about them, they can take a toll. So I think that's important. And thank you for sharing that. And then I'll pop it over to Rachel.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what my fellow panelists have said. Definitely prioritizing your goals and what you want to spend your free time doing, and also finding those moments really for yourselves and doing what brings you joy, and you don't really have to have a lot of brain energy. Just allow yourself to just take a beat and really decompress. For me personally, a lot of the things I do in my free time coexist with my career. So I am a member and I volunteer on the committees of Women in Development. I'm a part of their which is a member-based organization that essentially is a network of development professionals, obviously women, people who identify as women, and there are committees. So I'm on the Special Programs Committee, then I'm also on the Young Professionals Task Force. So I'm a little crazy for doing development for 8 hours, and then my free time I'm doing development work as well. But again, like it's what Es-pranza said, kind of being around like-minded people and people who really share the same passions and goals as you. And I've met a lot of great people in my experience. That's why I do it. It's a volunteer position. So if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be doing it, but I do enjoy my time there. That's what also keeps me going doing it. But yeah, it's definitely, it's not easy, you know, after, even if I'm seeing a show after work, I will think, oh my gosh, I just spent my entire day in the arts and now I'm going to a show. Like, why did I do this to myself? But just not forcing, but kind of forcing yourself to go and really just let yourself enjoy your plans, and again, just finding that time to take for yourself, I think really helped ground me.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point too of how sometimes your outside extracurriculars, I guess, can coincide with your day-to-day, but finding that balance, and if that's what ignites you, like finding ways that you can do that and still meet other people and such, which also kind of leads into my next question. Each of you have brought up the point of kind of not relying on others, but like meeting other people and surrounding yourself with like-minded people in the arts and such. I am wondering, how important do you think building your own network has been in your specific professional career? And then on top of that, how did you go about building out your network throughout navigating different career pathways from college until your current positions? I don't know if anyone wants to go first. Otherwise, I can pass it over. I'll go back to Es-pranza.
I think that, well, first and foremost, it's so important to build out your networks. And I saw this thing on Twitter, or X, I don't know, I call it Twitter still. I saw this thing on Twitter where it was saying like, you know, I used to think networking was going to like these cocktail events or like these big events and you had to like shake hands with people, but networking happens so organically. It could be as simple as you're just at a place, you know, talk about work-life balance, but like you could be in a specific gallery and there's somebody maybe that's saying something that just is that sits really nicely with what you are already thinking about something. So you go over to them and introduce yourself, or like you meet somebody at the front desk of somewhere and you just have an organic conversation. So I think that yes, networking is important, but what I want to say is the way that I think that you should build out that network of support is to keep in touch. Like you keep in touch with anybody you meet, anybody at all. And this can be like, we all have that stack of business cards that have been given to us from whoever at whatever place that we were in. But I've found that some of the best relationships I've had have just been those like moments where I'll email someone and say like, thank you, it was so nice meeting you. This was such an enriching experience, or whatever, you know, you can phrase it whatever way you want. And you really do keep a connection like that. Over the course of my time, I have met, when it comes to like college professors, I chose certain people to be my advisor because I knew that I wanted to sustain a relationship with them. I didn't choose an advisor based on just like, I just want to pass this thesis project and then I never want to see this person again. A lot of my advisors has influenced like the work I've done since being in school. And it's the same as like the museums that I've worked in. I've worked in other places and I still go and visit there. And if we're not talking about museums, great. But if we are talking about museums, they'll remember, okay, if we have an exhibit like this, let's tap Es-pranza on the shoulder and see if she might be interested in curating it or creating some type of content for it. I can keep going with how important networking is, but I don't want to take up too much time. But I just want to stress the point that networking is not a formal business event. It can be, but that's not the way that I've experienced it. I've really experienced that organic meet cutes, organic meet cutes with other people in other industries.
Thank you for bringing up that point. I feel like that is something that I had that misconception early on. I was like, yeah, how do people make time to go to all these networking events and do all these things? I was like, I'm never going to be successful. I can't do all this. But then you come to realize like networking is just communication with people and following up. So thank you for making that point. I'll pop over to Rachel if you want to share your experience in how networking has helped, or has it helped your career path?
Absolutely. I agree that networking is very important. And I also agree that it could be very organic. I know it's sometimes you may feel awkward, especially if you're an introvert. I consider myself an introverted extrovert. But just going up to people, cold messaging on LinkedIn or cold emailing. I have done it. It's brought successes. I've had it done to me, and I'm always happy to either sit down with someone, particularly like former interns or younger professionals that I've worked with, keeping that relationship and, always I make sure with everyone I work with to let them know, like, if you ever need anything, like, I'm always happy to be a reference. I'm always happy to talk about anything or grab a coffee, grab a lunch, whatever. I'm always happy, and people remember that. So I'll get an email or a message months, years later, like, I'm in the city. I'd love to sit down and grab coffee and talk about so and so. And those relationships, sustaining those are definitely very important. And I also look for other communities that also have like-minded people, like women in development. One of my friends who I actually met at a development like happy hour, we became really good friends, and then she ended up being the co-chair of the Young Professionals Task Force. And then that's how I ended up on it. She reached out to me, told me about this new group. I thought it was, really, again, exactly what I needed, a group of young folks like me in the same industry with kind of the same vision. I thought, obviously, like, why wouldn't I want to be a part of that? So just maintaining those relationships and seeking opportunities where you can find them. I definitely encourage, not being afraid to put yourself out there. Again, it could feel awkward, but no one's going to mind you doing what you need to do for yourself. So I'm always an advocate of just, going for it.
Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. And yeah, it sounds like it's a great way to garner support, as well as, yeah, not only are you, maybe you're looking to like just get career advice when you're networking, but also people, then you have a connection with that person, and you never know when they're going to come to you and be like, okay, now I actually am looking for some advice, or, everyone has their own strengths. I think you make a great point, just like maintaining those relationships and such. I'll pass it over to Jayde.
Yes. I think everyone has already expressed how important it is to really like network, especially, again, as someone who isn't working in any sort of art space at all for my 9 to 5, I definitely had to do a ton of network. I definitely had to do a ton of networking to be able to stop. I'm so sorry. I had to do a lot of networking. Sorry, I'm gone all day, and my dog walker could not come today, which of course, so she has a lot of energy. I'm so sorry. So with that being said, okay. So with that being said, networking is truly so important. And some of the ways that I was really able to build my network was, and I think Rachel really talked about this too, is like really just putting yourself out there, like going to an art show if you're wanting to get into like art exhibitions, going to a film screening if you're wanting to get into filmmaking, not being afraid to talk to people, while you're there. And like you said, exchange numbers, exchange the Instagrams, set up the coffee dates, just get to know those people, learn more about what they're doing. I think another great way that I've been able to also like network is, if you want to be able to, get a network of support, you also have to be willing to bring me. Sorry, because she wants me to play fetch with her. So if she brings it, I'll throw it. Bring it. Come on. So with that being said, you have to also not be afraid to support people as well. So a lot of what I did is if I knew that there were people that were doing things that I was very interested in doing, I would go to their things. I would go to their, if they were having a studio visit or an artist talk, so they could see that I was someone that was really interested. And I think that that also helped leverage me being able to, when it was my turn to create something, and currently my turn to be creating things, people were really on board to help me because they saw the seriousness and like the dedication to what I was trying to do. When I think about like the art exhibition that happened at Heath Gallery, that was all just like putting myself out there. The person, her name's Jomani, who helped me, who is a curator. I didn't really know her that well. I'm friends with her roommate. I just reached out to her. I'd met her at, you know, my friend, her roommate's birthday party. I was like, hey, you do a lot of really cool work. I'm really inspired by it. I don't know where to start. Can you help me? And I didn't know how she was going to respond. She doesn't know me. I'm her roommate's friend. But she was so kind. And that's another thing that I've found too. You'll be so surprised by how people are willing to work with you if you put yourself out there. Same for Heath Gallery. I had no idea that this was going to end up in a gallery, but we reached out to the gallery owner. She was very moved by the vision. And she was like, hey, we have the time, we have the space. I support this. Let's do it. And so having that again, taking that risk and seeing what that kind of led to, that has continued to really increase again that momentum of like, hey, I'm going to the people. I'm just going to reach out to you. I'm just going to say the thing. I'm going to tell you what I'm trying to do. And we'll see what happens from there. With the art residency, my partner and I, that I'm working on it with, he and I are like trying to find a space. I went to a panel that someone was hosting at this school that I know holds a lot of different like artistic events. He saw that I came. I told him after the panel, hey, I would love to talk to you a little bit more about an idea I have. We exchanged numbers. We set up a visit for me to be able to come and see the school. He introduced me to the leaders of the school. And then now, like, that's a space for next summer for the, you know, the program we're trying to do. So all of that to say, I'm sorry, because I don't want to keep rambling, but all of that to say is like, if you have an idea, just talk to people that are doing that thing, and like don't be afraid to do it, because I promise you, even if maybe the first time you're met with like someone not being as interested or supportive, you will find those people that are really excited to help you because they're remembering how they had people help them get their start.
I can't help it. I have to say, your doggy is like actually showing what you're saying. You just keep at it. You keep saying, you keep going.
Yeah, she's persistent.
Thank you for sharing that, Jade. I think it's so important. And a through line there is that you were just building trust with people. And I feel like it's just when you build that trust, you show up for one another, then people are willing to offer that support and vice versa. So thank you all for sharing that. I did want to touch on something that someone brought up in the chat. Fariha mentioned that they are kind of navigating two different majors or disciplines, and they're looking to hear about how you have managed to navigate different career paths, or maybe majors. Like in Es-pranza, you were a history major, and now you're in the curatorial education space and such. And Rachel, you have the arts and entertainment background, but now you're in funding and development. So I'm just curious to know how each of you kind of navigated like your majors being a little bit different, and like how you found your way into the arts, how it like coincided, or any advice you would give to someone who maybe has that history major right now, or that anthropology major, and how they could get into the arts field, or like transferable skills even that you have found have helped you. I don't know who wants to kick that one off first.
I'll go. I mean, you said it, looking for those transferable skills. I learned a lot in my college classes, obviously, but it was really the experiences that I went through that really made me unique and really helped me be open-minded with the career path I wanted to take. So I would say definitely allow yourself, although you may be concentrating on one thing right now, whether it's your major or it's what you maybe think you want to do, but 5 years later that could change, or you could be in a position that has really nothing to do with your major. You just have to allow yourself to be open-minded and not really stick to the thought of, oh, now I majored in history, now I have to, be in the history field. It's really just keeping lookout for opportunities, whether or not it has to do with what you're studying or what you're doing now, just always being open-minded and just going for it.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it sounds like it's important not to silo yourself, because there are so many different transferable skills between a lot of different industries. I don't know, Es-pranza, do you want to share?
I think, well, first and foremost, Poster House is design, for anyone who doesn't know, Poster House is primarily like a design museum. New York Historical was a history museum. So I went from like traditional, like this is what I study, this is what I do. I went from a history museum where like they were steeped in it, to a design museum where you can incorporate history in different ways, but the crux of it all is this history of design, this history of art. I have never taken an art history course before, but as I said before, I really like storytelling. And so it didn't really matter where I ended up. I just knew I wanted to be in a place where they appreciated that thing. And so that's like part of the first answer, but I also want to throw in something else and then I'll weave everything together. As that was happening, as I'm thinking like storytelling is the most important thing in my life, and also education is the most important thing. So like I want to be able to teach a 3-year-old, and I want a 3-year-old to like walk into an exhibit and learn the same message that someone 55 and better would learn. Like I knew that I wanted the same message to resonate. It might be worded differently, of course, but the same message has to resonate. So that's where the storytelling. But in addition to that, the minute I stepped into the first museum I worked in, I realized Black women are not in these places because they relegate us to certain positions in museums or in cultural institutions. Every museum I've worked at, I have been one of at most 5 Black women. When I worked at a larger museum, there were about 300, I think, employees. That number did not change when it comes to full-time Black women. And even in the museum I'm at now, I'm currently the only Black woman at that museum. I'm in a full-time position. And so thinking about those two things, I knew that it wasn't necessarily a matter of like balancing all of these interests. It's more so like I should be able to walk into these spaces with just like the confidence that any other group of people who are able to be in these spaces, like it comes with them. Like I think of a lot of white men who are able to not have any type of history degree or any type of museum studies, anything, and have very notable positions in these institutions. And I'm still trying to deal with that, by the way. I don't think I have the same audacity of some people that like I'm still very reserved in ways that I approach this, but I'm trying to learn that. And so I had to put away this whole thought of like, if I just have a history degree, that means I can only apply to these places. I had to really come to terms with myself to say like, no, you're a Black woman, and if you're not in these spaces, like that representation is just not going to be there, because I don't know when the next time a Black woman is going to be a curator at Poster House currently. So I know it's not the best answer to this question, but that's the way I kind of the direction I kind of wanted to take that question.
No, I definitely appreciate your transparency and vulnerability in sharing that. I think it's very important to highlight that it's like you're still figuring it out, and it's complicated. It's a complicated field when it comes to hierarchies and roles and such. But I also agree that if we're not in these spaces, the representation just won't be there, sadly. So Thank you for sharing that. Jade, I don't know if you wanted to add also.
Yeah, because I feel like it's funny, I feel like the answer that I was going to provide is really connected to what E and R put in the chat. As someone who, as someone who is in education, and shout out to occupational therapists, I'm SPED certified, so worked with OTs a lot. But I think it's just like stepping out of that imposter syndrome and feeling like I need to gain more skills, or I need to, do this thing or do that thing, kind of connected to what Es-pranza was saying. Have the audacity of a white man. Believe that you can do anything that you want to do, even if on paper you don't have necessarily like the skills or the skill sets. Because I think existing in a capitalist society, we're often forced to think, and this is kind of connected back again to my why earlier. I think we're forced to think that we are these sort of singular beings that, like, oh, my job, this thing is the only thing that I can be. And then we're also like the children of people who, and of course, this doesn't apply for everyone, but I'll just at least speak from like the experience with my parents, who get a job, they stay in that field for the next like 25 to 30 years, then they retire. And maybe they like moved up or whatever, but like it was still the same kind of job or the same company. And I think what's so exciting about the time that we live in is that we don't have to live that way anymore. I think people like in our generation, millennials, Gen X, like we're realizing that like I chose a major, or I chose this thing when I was like 18, which I think is ridiculous, by the way, that at 18, 19, 20, you're supposed to choose what you're doing for the rest of your life when we change literally so much. But I think it's like this understanding that just because I did this thing at this phase in my life, it doesn't mean that I have to stay doing that. Something that was really special that was told to me by the owner of Heath Gallery, Miss Sandra Heath, when I was navigating, do I want to stay in a school this next school year? And I'll be transparent, I kind of want to get out of working in schools. I've been doing it for like the past 8 years now, and it's exhausting work. But she told me life is about seasons. And you have to think about like, what season am I in? And what does that season look like for me? And so I feel like, kind of back to the networking thing that I said earlier, I think it's first really identifying, what do you even want to do in the art space? Because as we heard from Es-pranza, as we heard from Rachel, and even now as an adult, I'm learning, which is sort of one of the reasons why I wanted to do the art residency, because I want more Black children at younger ages to know all of the really exciting careers that exist in the artistic space. But with that being said, I didn't know all of the things that existed in that space. So I think it's first even getting clear, what does my art journey look like? Do I want to become a painter? Do I want to curate shows? Do I want to be an exhibition designer, a photographer, whatever that looks like? Getting very clear on that, or maybe it's even a couple of things. And I think from getting clear on that, then finding out, not necessarily like going back to school or the gaining of the skills, because I'm sure you have those skills. It's art, it's creative. There isn't a thing to be taught or a skill to be had. You just bring out what's within you and you make it live. I think that it's identifying that, and then you coming up with your plan of how do I want to make this happen. There's so many different like grants and fellowships. I encourage you to look at the Laundromat Project. They're always having different funding cycles to fund projects that people want to do that are artistic. I don't know how we'll connect after this space, but I know I have like a lot of really great resources that I can share of like how you can start kind of figuring out, where are the spaces, where are the groups or the orgs that I can join? What are maybe the different funding opportunities? What's the writing club I can get with, or the photography group, or the arts accountability group? And then you really carving out the time for yourself to make it happen, because it can happen. It won't obviously be an overnight thing, nothing is. Becoming an occupational therapist was not an overnight thing. That took you time. But I think that when you identify what it is that you want to do, and then you start thinking about where are the places that I need to be, how do I need to position myself to get close to it and to start doing that work and building a name, it will really fall into place because you're doing this. I don't know where you're located, but if you are here in, New York City or the New York City area, you're in literally such an amazing place to make, at least speaking from my experience, to make really whatever you're trying to see happen, because it is a place that is excited to fund and invest in the art and artists and artistic projects.
Thank you so much for that advice, Jayde. Something you touched on, which ENR said in their message, was, do you feel like it's necessary to go back to school to gain more skills, or can you offer different ideas around how to gain those skills? And I think something you touched on that's really important is sometimes, depending on what path you want to choose, sometimes, yeah, you might have to go back to school, but that's not always the case. Like, you can build up your resume, you can build up through finding different fellowships, grants, side projects, and through networking. And so I think it, just like Jayde said, it's really honing in on what exactly that shift is, and then the steps you need to take to get to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be always based in going back to academia, because we all know it's very expensive to go back to school for, it just can be a lot. So I just wanted to touch on that. I do want to give us time to have open up to our Q&A. I just wanted to ask one more question to our panelists, and that is, if you were to go back at the beginning of your career, or if you feel like you're in this transitional phase, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself if looking back from your current position now? And I think I'll choose Rachel to kick off this.
Sure. I think for me personally, it was not worrying about a timeline of my career. I mean, at least I experienced a lot of pressure. You graduate college, you have to find a job. I wasn't ready to find a job. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to be in the arts, but I didn't know what that meant. So that's why I did a fellowship. I found ways to still learn. I mean, you learn in anything you do, any experience you gain, you are learning something, but I really just didn't worry about what my other classmates were doing. I didn't, although I was happy for my friends who already found jobs right after graduating, I allowed myself to really take my own time because I was still figuring it out. And I feel confident now that I am starting to really figure out what I can see, like what my 20 years down the road might look like. I mean, again, that can change. But I feel very confident now just because I didn't allow myself to stick to, what I originally thought. If I wasn't open-minded, I would say also allow yourself to be open-minded. If I had to choose what I was doing right after college, I'd still be working at a theater. I didn't know that I would love the world of working in art museums, particularly at large institutions, because before I worked at a very small organization, and even thinking about the Met itself, I'm like, the Met, like that's the Met, like I could never work there. What Jayde said about imposter syndrome, like, no, like I have every right to be there. I, again, have the experiences, the skills. It's really just putting yourself out there. And I wish although like it didn't really affect how I got here. I wish that I still knew that it's okay to, not exactly know what you want to do right away. And you might change your mind down the line. Just remember to stay open-minded. But I think, really not allowing yourself to stick to, or not worrying about a timeline so much, what really helped.
Thank you, Rachel. I'll pass it really quickly over to Es-pranza.
I think earlier this year, my answer to this question would have been, I would have never went to grad school. I had always, right after undergrad, I kept talk about networking. I had kept up connections with my supervisor, who I'd worked with for a college internship. And the minute I got into grad school, I emailed her and I was like, I got into Columbia, like I'm coming back to New York. And she was like, oh, you're going to be back in New York. We have a position that we want you to apply to. And I remember while I was in grad school, I was like, I'm already in the museum field. Like, what do I need this advanced degree for? I already got everything I wanted. So earlier this year, I probably would have said like grad school, because I got everything I got into a museum without it. So I didn't really need it. But after speaking to a lot of different people, what I realized was over time, my mission in life has evolved very subtly, but it's evolved nonetheless. And if I stand on this platform of I want Black women to be present in these spaces, and I want Black women to, again, using the same term, like walk into the room with the audacity of a white man, like if I want these things, like there are ways that larger institutions need to invest in Black women. And so when I thought, oh, I have this master's degree, I'm going to ask my job to now fund something else for me, because I want them to know that I'm an investment and I need to be taken seriously. So I had to rethink that as like a shift, as like something that I wish I had undone. Also, I learned these amazing like writing skills. And of course, like I met this great network of professors. So I really had to rethink that particular thing. The reason why I say that is because I know how it feels sometimes to be in a grad program and to feel like this is grueling and it's, where is this leading to? So I want to put that out there as like, I regretted it at one time. But now, since it's no longer earlier this year, now if I had done something differently, I think I would have experienced other cultural institutions as a whole, not just museums. I think I would have tried to work at different types of places, to even like maybe even like a publishing house, like something, other places where maybe I could have exposure to storytelling. I should get $1 every time I say that. Storytelling in a different way, because I think that my particular story is one of those like, oh, she knew what she was doing in high school and she just kept going and she's still in the museum field, and that's, but maybe if I would have pivoted a little bit, it would have really solidified like, this is where I need to be. But that's not to say that I don't love where I am. I love my job. I love what I'm doing. I love the opportunities I've been getting, but maybe that would have been a nice change.
Thank you for your transparency. And I'll quickly pass it to Jayde before we open up to Q&A.
Yeah, so it's really funny because similar to Es-pranza, I think that if you had asked me like earlier in the year, I would have probably said, I wish that I'd never become a teacher. And that I wish that I would have like, gone to art school instead. Because again, being here and being around all of these people who I perceive to be doing the things that I wish I could have been doing, really made me feel that way. But now I would definitely say, honestly, I have no advice. It would be to do everything exactly like how I did it. And I say that because I think that every experience that I had has played such a critical role to the work that I've done. The exhibition was inspired from working in Chicago, working in a neighborhood. I don't ever like to perpetuate the stereotypes, but I did work in a neighborhood where a lot of my students had a ton of trauma that they were coming to school with every single day. We did not have a social worker that worked with every student or that was even there every day. So that required me to really learn a lot about social emotional learning and how to be that resource for kids. Unpacking that, realizing that Black people in general have not been given a lot of space to, and I'll even say people of color, have not really been given a lot of space to really talk about our emotions and have that emotional vulnerability. We're very much labeled by our emotions. And thinking about how we can explore that through art is what really led to this exhibition. And I even think about, if we're talking about transferable skills, a lot of the skills that I have gained being a teacher, thinking about lesson planning, backwards planning, thinking about when I want to create something from the end, and thinking about what are the steps that I need to take to get to my end result. I'm working now like I said, on this youth artist residency, I'm working on it with someone who is an artist. He and I laugh often because we talk about, and I learned this from the group art exhibition, sometimes, no offense, artists are not very organized people. Artists sometimes are not people that are going to meet the deadlines or get there on time. But I'm a person, because of my work, that has had to be very like organized and focused in that sort of way. So those are skills that I get to bring to the table that the people around me like might not necessarily excel in because their work doesn't require that of them, but is such a valuable piece of making any sort of artistic project run. And so I think once I started to really realize that, wow, I have all of these things that like on paper aren't necessarily, you know, the sexiest or the most creative, but they are some of those like essential foundational things that make an exhibition run, that make a residency happen, that make a gallery, you know, operate, or a museum operate efficiently. And so I wouldn't change it. And I would say to everybody in this space who's working in a field that's not created to the artistic practice, think about, like Rachel said, those transferable skills and what you bring to the table that's invaluable to a space that sometimes doesn't have those things.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jade. I want to thank our three panelists so much for sharing your insights to your career, your vulnerability. I know that it can be hard to share out personal pathways and such. So thank you so much. And now I do want to give some space for Q&A. So if anyone wants to unmute, if anyone wants to open up in the chat and ask specific questions or just general questions for our panelists, I welcome this time to be the space to do so. If there are any questions.
Hi, this is Shanae. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing like your time and just everything. Like, thank you. There was a lot of things that did resonate, like being able to have more than one hat. And then it's good to hear that some of the things that you're speaking of are related to that I am doing. So it's kind of encouraging to be on that right track. Yeah, just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Shanae, for sharing.
I do want to just add something because I had to catch up a little bit on the chat, but I did see Sky Shepherd had mentioned about transition to a full-time career, inspiring to hear. So I just wanted to add on to that. And I think Rachel and Jade, you both said added to this as well, but it made me think about as I've been working in museums, we've had to do stuff like we've had to hire photographers for huge galas that we had, We've had to hire photographers for opening galas that we have at the museum. We hire people called gallery assistants. They are part-time, but we kind of like ask them to serve on certain museum committees while they're doing their JD tasks, but you know, other duties as deemed necessary. So they serve on certain task forces. We've asked people to guest speak for events. So it got that comment made me think that like to start your career, sometimes it is a matter of the way that you market yourself so that people tap you on the shoulder like, hey, can you do this gig? And that builds up that resume. So now you have that padding around whatever your job, your formal job title looks like, but but that padding shows like this person can also do this thing. Like somebody else, does anyone else need a photographer? We use this person, maybe you can reach out to them. So that's what that comment made me think about. And that's a lot of how I think that I got into writing for like publications. I emailed someone one day and I was like, hey, I do a really good job writing about this topic. Is there an opportunity to write more about it? And it just so happened that this person was reviving a database, and that's how I got into it. I'm not an author, but I know how to write. And so I just kind of pitched myself in that way. So yeah.
I have a question. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, I'm Lisa. I'm an artist, and I'm also running a, what would you call it? I'm running a fellowship residency. One of my resident cohorts is on there, Lisa Marie. The question is, with all the hats that you're carrying, how do you stay organized? Because I'm one of the artists that's not organized. And I have 3 different things living in my head right now, 3 different kind of organizations. I need help with that or suggestions.
Jade, do you want to take on this one?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if this is my my question. I think the biggest thing, and I feel bad because I don't want to say something that you're like, well, I'm already doing that. But but I think like one big thing is like really like relying on my calendar and really like setting those times. But on top of setting those times, like really being like honoring those times with fidelity, because I think it's so easy to put something on our to-do list or put something like on the calendar, and then you're like, oh well, I'll do it in the next hour, or oh, I'll get to it tomorrow, and then like you keep doing that, and then tomorrow never comes, or the next hour never comes, and then you find yourself in a area of stress. So I think it really does just kind of look like, how do I really honor the time that I've said that I've had? How do I really kind of like chunk the task? And then also thinking about like delegating and like working with others. So with the art residency that's coming about, how it happened is a friend of mine who's an artist, we were kind of just like chatting, and we were talking about both wanting to do something with youth. And, you know, he and I were like, well, why don't we just work together? Because yes, sometimes I think that like we like the idea of like, oh, well, this is mine and I'm doing it for myself. But I think it's been really exciting to like work with other people and do things in collaboration, because it does give you an accountability partner. It also gives you someone else to delegate things to. And then it also just gives you a different lens or a way of thinking about how to approach something in a way that you haven't thought of. And then also, because I took this course over the summer, about, it was mostly about learning outcomes, but generative AI. But I'm going to be honest, Chat GPT does everything. It makes you project plans. It'll write things for you. All you need to do is like go in and tweak it. And I think like not a lot of people are really utilizing Chat GPT, but I found it to be such a time saver for getting like tasks created and getting things written. So I hope that that was helpful to you.
I also would like to add that just be very transparent about what you're capable of doing and what you have the capacity for. I have to do that with myself. Like I have to be very honest with myself, and sometimes it's so heartbreaking because you have all these dreams and passions, but be very honest with yourself, and also be very strict about what you're willing to take on. I'm a work in progress, but I've also only taken on, as of right now, paid opportunities, because I know that I don't have the free capacity to just do a lot of this labor without compensation. Maybe eventually over time that might change, but as of right now, I don't have the capacity. So just being honest with yourself about like, these are my boundaries, or these are what I'm capable of doing. And that's helped me with organization.
Yeah. Oh, and then one other thing I want to add to that, because you spoke, when you said boundaries, it made me think of, and I can't believe I didn't mention this, because this is something that has become really important to me with the pandemic, but like also just like making time for rest. Because you can't really think with like the most organized or the most productive brain if you're not building that time, and like connecting to Es-pranza's point of like boundaries, if you're not building that time for rest. I think that like sometimes of course, there's some things that are like hard deadlines, but when I think about the things that we're creating and when we're thinking about our passions, there are no set deadlines. Again, I think like capitalism makes us think you got to do it quick, you got to do it fast, but sometimes it doesn't have to happen quickly. It doesn't have to happen fast. Every time you make an effort or do a thing that's bringing you closer to the outcome, you are doing something that is impactful to the work that you want to see happen. So I think that like making sure that you take care of yourself and you meet your needs, and you celebrate yourself for the things that you are accomplishing and doing, because they matter and they're important.
Thank you, Jade. I know Lisa Maria, you had raised a hand earlier, so I want to get to you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, so yeah, the other Lisa who just spoke is my facilitator at Jamaica Center for the Arts and Learning. I'm part of the fellowship there. And first of all, like many others have said, thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for all this knowledge, for the sharing. And I also wanted to emphasize, yeah, just sign up for it. Go for it. Go for that fellowship. Go for that art show. Just go for it. It just, you never know. You just never know. And definitely following up on those connections you make. I love when you guys are talking about how networking can be organic, because I think that the word actually frightens people, like even myself. I'm like, I'm networking, like what? But it's not. It is. It's communication. It's meeting people. It's talking, and you never know who you're going to talk to, and just keep that communication going. I'm excited about being connected now with Museum Hugh, which I found out about because of Lisa and the fellowship, and that you guys have this new platform. So I hope that that's a way to stay in touch, because I did see that on the chat, Jade gave her email. I don't know if others, if we can do that, because even here, we already have here like I'm sure so many connections can be made just right here with the few of us that are here now. But I loved what Es-pranza just said about celebrating yourself. And you were talking, Jade, also about self-care and honor where you're at. So I'm 53, and I've had a lot of hats over the years: art educator, art, all these different things. I was caregiver. Well, I still am caregiver, but now I have full-time care for my elderly dad with dementia. But I joined a group that NYU offers. Thank goodness. We live in a state that does have like lots of resources. Anywho, and they had this art class. They had joined up with the MoMA. And then afterwards, we kept talking, some of the women, and then we made our own little group. And then we stayed in touch. And then like, it's just, you never know what things are going to grow. So I really love that you guys are emphasizing that stay in touch, that, reciprocity of just, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa Maria. And you brought up a great point that I will reiterate before we hop off at 7. But yes, Museum Hugh, we do have our membership platform. So if you are a member, it's $30 for the year, but you'll have access to other members, and you'll be able to network that way too if you are looking for this community hub of support from people who are creatives in the field, who are arts professionals, and who also just want to be around other arts professionals who might be looking for a shift and such. I know Fariha, I saw you had a hand up. I wanted to make space if you still had a question.
Yeah, again, thank you, all three of you for your responses, and Addison for being such a great moderator. I had kind of a heavy question, so I'm not sure there'll be time for answers, but I did want to ask, I'm like a grad student, and I'm at UChicago, which is it's a predominantly white institution. It's a very, very predominantly white space. And I've worked and studied in environments, tried to we've done a few events and art exhibitions and stuff, where we're working with a lot of white or predominantly white stakeholders and collaborating with. How have you guys, when you've been in professional spaces where you feel just institutionally you're dealing with a lot of pushback that has to do with you being Black or a minority, whether it's religious or ethnic, how do you manage to cope with those situations, both in the professional workspace and then personally as well? How do you protect yourself from burnout, or how do you pick and choose what battles to fight?
I can take this purely because I just, the Black Panther exhibit was a blackety black show, and as I mentioned, I'm the only Black woman at the job that I'm currently at, and for most of my career I've been the only Black woman, or one of few Black women. I think this is another thing that I'm still learning how to navigate, but from the, one thing that I can say tangibly that I've kind of like pushed my institution to do is we're a fairly young institution. We only opened our doors in 2019. Prior to 2021 or 2022, I'm forgetting which year, we would, when you go inside an exhibit, it would say, this exhibit includes racially, what is that word that some places use, like racial undertones or something like that. It would say like any type of comfortable language to basically say racist. So I had said, like, why don't we just say racist? Why don't we just say that? And it was like, oh, because the people that lend to us don't want to use that word. And so I had said, like, but it's not just about whether we want to use it or not. That's exactly what it is. You're saying the same thing, but why don't you just say racist? So I brought it up to somebody, and then within, I think, like 24 hours, maybe less, it went up to the museum director, and we got a notice that we will now be saying racist from this point forward and just naming it for what it is. And I learned that year that it's better to name it rather than explain it. I'm not going to explain to people what I'm feeling. I'm not going to do that because that requires a lot of emotional labor to me. I'm just going to name it for what it is. And that's what's helped me really maintain my sanity in these places. I have had problems where people have made me feel uncomfortable, and I've said explicitly, I will not be working with like this professor or with this person at all. And I think that if you, at the very least, if you decide that my well-being is something that I cherish, name it, don't explain it. This is the boundary that I've set for myself. I'm going to name this thing. And if these people don't honor that, then I don't know if it's the best environment for you. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general, like you all, like just be very, very, very clear on what you will and won't accept from these places. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to jump into that because I feel like that question is so large, and it really stood out to me earlier when Es-pranza was naming that, like, I guess in the arts field. And this was something that came up a lot during my art exhibition when I was like, this isn't just like an art specific thing in any spaces. If I think about education, oftentimes, they want to relegate Black educators or educators of color, especially like in urban schools, to being behavior or culture people or being like a gym teacher. We are never seen as like instructional leaders. We are not thought of to be the data people and to do that type of work. So like trying to build myself, I consider literacy to really be my thing. So like trying to build myself up in a space that's highly dominated. I think we all know like white women English teachers. So like trying to like build yourself up in that space, it's difficult work. I think what Es-pranza said about like just naming it and naming it with confidence. Don't cower. And again, to the imposter syndrome, like know that you deserve to, and not even deserve because that sounds weird, like you needed to earn it. You're in that space, and like believe and know and honor that like your space there is just as important as anyone else's space there. So that means that you should never sacrifice your comfort for other people. If you feel discomfort, that is something that you should honor. That's something that you should name, and that's something you should be honest about. I also want to be honest too, because like sometimes that gets blowback. My Chicago school, my principal hated me because I told him not prioritizing teaching Black kids how to write is racist. And I just said it. And that made me public enemy number one. So I think that when we are naming it though, it is important to ask yourself too, am I prepared for what can come with that? Because sometimes when we are confident people of color that are naming the things in spaces that we know are white dominant, white funded, white led, that can come with repercussions. But that's not to say don't do it, but it's saying that if you're going to do it, if you're going to take that step, believe in yourself, know that it's important, know that you're doing that thing, and like don't let that deter you, but also know that it is a struggle and it's a fight, but it's a fight worth doing because you know that you have your pride, your integrity, and your honoring of yourself attached to it.
Thank you so much, Jayde and Es-pranza and Rachel. I want to be mindful of time because I know it's getting late and it is a little bit past 7. I saw that there were a few other questions in the chat and everyone was able to give their emails. If it's okay with Rachel, Jayde, and Es-pranza, if you're okay with me in our follow-up email sharing those emails with attendees today. And then I do have the names of the folks who asked those other 2 questions we didn't get to. One about a mentor, if you have a mentor in your career and how that affected your career. And the other one about and DEAI initiatives and efforts and unionization and how that has affected the field or if it has yet, and changes that have been seen. So I can connect those folks who ask those questions and we can answer them after. But I just want to sincerely thank each of our panelists for being here today for this critical conversation and for being vulnerable and transparent and sharing out a lot of your amazing experiences in your career journeys. So thank you. And then I want to thank all of our attendees for coming today. We really appreciate you coming to our kickoff session of this Career Jumpstart series. We are really hoping that this can be a series of professional development resources. We will be posting a bunch of resources on our membership platform, Circle. So we encourage membership and sign-ups, and you'll get free access to the rest of the virtual series and all of our other programming. And our next session is going to be Thursday, October 12th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. in partnership with the National Council on Public History, who will be leading a workshop around application, cover letter, and resume best practices. And so they'll be going through concrete examples and the do's and don'ts when you're applying to different jobs and such. But I really think it will be great no matter what career industry you're in. It's always good to freshen up on those practices. So we encourage you to attend that. And I encourage you to become a member if you are not one. But I know Amanda dropped in the chat some of the links to our website and our membership sign up. And I just want to extend a very big thank you to you all being here. It felt like a really great time and conversation. So thank you all. And we'll be in contact via email with a survey and links to the next session and everyone's email from our panelists today.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you for
you
having me,
all.
Museum U.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks so much.
Thanks again. Thank you.
I'm gonna
And who knew
email
the
you.
connections? Yes, who knew
I
the
wanna see
connections?